Human language is among the most complex achievements of the brain, a tapestry of sounds, symbols, and meanings woven seamlessly into daily life. Words flow from one person to another, carried by air or ink, yet beneath these simple exchanges lies a vast network of neural machinery. Each utterance, each sentence read or spoken, sparks a cascade of electrical signals across specialized regions of the brain, transforming thought into communication. Understanding how the brain accomplishes this feat, bridging perception, memory, and meaning, reveals both the intricacy of our biology and the universality of our need to connect. From the earliest babble of infancy to the fluent conversations of adulthood, the brain's language systems are constantly at work, adapting, learning, and sometimes faltering. By exploring the architecture and mechanisms behind language processing, we glimpse not just how we speak and understand, but what it means to be human. Language, in all its richness and subtlety, is one of the defining features of the human experience. It serves as the invisible architecture that enables us to exchange ideas, share emotions, and pass knowledge from one generation to the next. Yet, behind this seemingly effortless act of communication lies a complex interplay between specialized regions of the brain, intricate pathways, and a set of foundational building blocks that together perform the marvel of turning thought into meaningful sound, and, conversely, interpreting those sounds as meaning. To understand how the brain processes language, we must explore both the brain's structures and the essential components that make language possible. At its core, language is much more than just words or sounds. It is constructed from several key elements. Semantics gives words their meaning. Without semantics, a word is just a meaningless sound. Grammar provides structure, laying out the rules that govern how words fit together so our sentences make sense. Then there is social context, those subtle cues and unwritten conventions that shape how language is used in different situations and with different people. These building blocks work together, allowing us to convey facts, ask questions, tell stories, and express complex emotions with remarkable flexibility. To process and produce language, the brain relies on a network of regions, each with its own specialized role. Among these, Broca's area and Wernicke's area stand out as two of the most essential players. Broca's area, located in the left frontal lobe near Brodmann areas 44 and 45, is primarily responsible for language production. When we speak, Broca's area choreographs the precise motor movements needed to form words, ensuring that our speech flows with rhythm and clarity. But Broca's area does more than orchestrate the physical act of speaking. It also plays a significant role in understanding grammar and constructing sentences, helping us arrange words in ways that are not only correct but also expressive. Wernicke's area, by contrast, is found in the superior temporal gyrus of the left hemisphere. This region is crucial for language comprehension. When we listen to someone speak or read a sentence, Wernicke's area helps us decode the stream of sounds or words, mapping them onto meanings. Without the smooth functioning of Wernicke's area, language can lose its sense, leaving a person able to speak fluently but with little meaning, an effect that becomes dramatically clear in certain language disorders. The story of how these areas were discovered is a fascinating chapter in the history of neuroscience. In the 19th century, French physician Paul Broca identified a region in the frontal lobe that was consistently damaged in patients who had lost the ability to produce speech but could still understand it. A few years later, German neurologist Karl Wernicke found another region, this time in the temporal lobe, associated with the opposite problem. Patients could speak fluently, but their language was often nonsensical, and they struggled to understand others. These observations laid the groundwork for what became known as the Wernicke-Lichtheim-Geschwin model of language processing, which proposed that these two regions, connected by a bundle of nerve fibers called the arcuate fasciculus, form the core of the brain's language network. The arcuate fasciculus acts as a critical bridge, allowing information to flow between Broca's area and Wernicke's area. When we repeat a word that we hear, for example, the auditory information is processed in Wernicke's area, which then sends this information along the arcuate fasciculus to Broca's area, where it is transformed into a motor plan for speech. If the arcuate fasciculus is damaged, the result is a particular type of language disorder known as conduction aphasia. In this condition, a person may understand language and produce speech, but struggles to repeat words or phrases, revealing just how essential this connection is for the seamless integration of comprehension and production. Yet, the brain's language network extends beyond these two regions and the pathway that connects them. The angular gyrus, located near the junction of the parietal, occipital, and temporal lobes, contributes to the integration of sensory information and the conversion of written words into sounds, playing a key role in reading and writing. other areas within the parietal, occipital, and temporal lobes support various aspects of language, including the processing of meaning, the recognition of sounds, and the association of words with their corresponding objects or concepts. Modern neuroscience suggests that language is not simply the product of isolated brain modules, but rather emerges from the dynamic interaction of a distributed network. While Broca's and Wernicke's areas are central hubs, the process of understanding and producing language engages a constellation of regions across the left hemisphere and sometimes even the right. This distributed model reflects the complexity of language itself, which draws upon sensory perception, memory, emotion, and executive control. The left hemisphere is generally dominant for language in most right-handed people, and even in a majority of left-handed people. Within this left-dominant core language network, different regions collaborate to analyze the sounds of speech, extract meaning, and generate responses. The temporal lobes process auditory information, the frontal lobe formulates grammatical structures, and the parietal and occipital lobes contribute to reading and writing by linking visual symbols to their linguistic counterparts. The dual-stream model of language processing offers another perspective on how the brain manages the flow of linguistic information. According to this model, there are two main pathways, the dorsal stream and the ventral stream. The dorsal stream connects auditory regions to motor areas, supporting the mapping of sounds to articulatory movements, essential for speaking and repeating words. The ventral stream, meanwhile, links auditory processing regions to areas involved in comprehension, facilitating the mapping of sounds to their meanings. This model underscores the idea that language processing is both distributed and specialized, with different pathways handling the various demands of communication. The functions of these brain regions become especially vivid when we consider what happens when they are damaged. Aphasia, a language disorder resulting from brain injury, illustrates the delicate balance and specialization within the language network. Broca's aphasia, often caused by damage to Broca's area, leads to slow, halting speech, with difficulty forming complete sentences but relatively preserved understanding. Wernicke's aphasia, in contrast, results from damage to Wernicke's area and is characterized by fluent but often meaningless speech and significant problems with comprehension. There are other forms of aphasia as well, such as conduction aphasia, which, as mentioned, arises from damage to the arcuate fasciculus and impairs the ability to repeat spoken language despite otherwise intact comprehension and production. Real-life stories help bring these clinical observations to life. For instance, there are accounts of individuals who, after suffering a stroke that affected Broca's area, found themselves struggling to utter even the simplest phrases, despite knowing exactly what they wanted to say. Others, with damage to Wernicke's area, could speak in long, flowing sentences that made little sense, as if the meaning had become detached from the words themselves. These cases highlight just how specialized and yet interconnected the brain's language regions are. But language is not simply a set of isolated skills mapped onto fixed brain regions. Many neuroscientists now view language as an emergent property, the product of interactions among multiple systems rather than the sum of discrete modules. This network perspective moves beyond the classic model, emphasizing how various brain areas contribute to different aspects of language at different times, depending on the demands of the situation. For example, reading a story, engaging in a debate, or interpreting a joke may activate overlapping but not identical patterns of brain activity, reflecting the flexible, context-dependent nature of human language. Evolutionary perspectives further highlight the uniqueness of human language processing. While some non-human primates show rudimentary forms of communication, the capacity for complex, rule-governed language appears to be a hallmark of our species. This uniqueness is reflected in the extensive and highly interconnected language networks in the human brain, which support not just the exchange of information, but the creation of shared worlds of meaning. Despite all that has been learned, many mysteries remain. The precise ways in which the brain's language network adapts to different languages and writing systems, how it recovers after injury, and how it supports the acquisition of language in children are all active areas of research. What is clear, however, is that language is not confined to a single language center in the brain. Instead, it emerges from the coordinated activity of multiple regions, each contributing a piece to the larger puzzle. In summary, the foundations of language in the brain rest upon a network of specialized and interconnected regions. Broca's area orchestrates the production of speech and the construction of grammar, while Wernicke's area deciphers meaning from a stream of words and sounds. The arcuate fasciculus binds these regions together, allowing for the fluid integration of comprehension and expression. The angular gyrus and other areas in the parietal, occipital, and temporal lobes round out this network, supporting reading, writing, and the integration of sensory information. This intricate web of connections enables us to transform thoughts into words, to understand others, and to participate in the uniquely human world of language. As our understanding of the brain deepens, so too does our appreciation for the extraordinary complexity and beauty of language, a system that is at once universal and endlessly diverse, woven into the very fabric of who we are. When you listen to someone speak or read a sentence on a page, your brain performs a series of astonishing feats, transforming fleeting sounds or static visual symbols into coherent meaning almost instantaneously. This journey from raw sensory input to understanding is one of the most intricate and dynamic processes the human brain undertakes, involving a finely tuned choreography of neural activity. The seamlessness of everyday conversation or reading belies the complexity beneath the surface, a complexity that scientists are only just beginning to unravel through advances in neuroimaging and cognitive neuroscience. Imagine a casual conversation. You hear the rise and fall of a friend's voice, notice subtle shifts in pitch and the rhythm of syllables, and, in a heartbeat, grasp not just the words but their intent, the implied subtext, and the emotions behind them. From the moment sound waves enter your ears, the brain is already at work. The auditory system processes these incoming sounds alongside other environmental noises, rapidly branching into distinct pathways specialized for different types of sound, including speech. Early on, areas of the auditory cortex begin to distinguish speech from other noises, laying the foundation for further linguistic analysis. This parallel processing ensures that speech is not lost in the cacophony of the world, but is instead fast-tracked for deeper interpretation. But spoken language is rarely just an auditory experience. Visual cues like the movement of lips and facial expressions play a crucial supporting role. When you watch someone talk, your brain does not simply process what you hear and see in isolation. Instead, it combines these streams of information in real time. Experimental research using intracranial recordings has shown that visual input from lip movements can actually activate the auditory cortex, highlighting just how intertwined these senses are in language perception. This audiovisual integration occurs at remarkable speed, boosting comprehension, especially in noisy or ambiguous situations. The perceptual advantage of combining sight and sound reflects the brain's ability to exploit every available cue to decode language. Reading, too, presents its own set of challenges and solutions. When your eyes scan a printed sentence, the journey begins with the visual cortex recognizing shapes and patterns as letters and words. These patterns are mapped onto their corresponding sounds and meanings through a network of specialized regions, some of which overlap with those used for spoken language. Functional MRI. Studies have revealed that, as we read, distinct yet interconnected areas process the visual forms of words called orthography, their sounds called phonology, and their meanings and structures called semantics and syntax. Eventually, these parallel streams converge in the superior temporal sulcus, a kind of neural crossroads where information from both spoken and written language is integrated, allowing for a unified experience of comprehension. As language enters the brain, whether through ears or eyes, it is parsed into smaller units, phonemes for speech, graphemes for writing. These are the building blocks upon which higher-level processes are constructed. The brain assembles these units into larger structures, syllables, words, phrases, and sentences. At each stage, specialized regions handle different aspects of the task. For instance, neuroimaging studies have shown that both the anterior and posterior temporal lobes are actively engaged during language comprehension. These regions help decipher meanings, unravel grammatical structure, and piece together the relationships among words. One of the most remarkable aspects of the brain's language system is its ability to perform unification, a process by which it derives higher-level meaning from these smaller building blocks. Unification encompasses the blending of phonological information, which means the sounds of language, morphological cues, which refers to the structure of words, semantic content, meaning, and syntactic rules, grammar. This process is not confined to a single brain area, but instead emerges from the dynamic interplay of multiple regions working together. The capacity for unification is what allows us to move seamlessly from recognizing a string of sounds or letters to grasping the nuance of a complex sentence. Despite their differences, spoken and written language share much of the same neural machinery. Evidence from neuroimaging and studies of signed language shows that the core processes for phrase building, assembling words into meaningful sequences, engage similar circuits regardless of the input modality. Whether listening, reading, or even observing sign language, the brain recruits overlapping networks to build meaning from the ground up. This universality points to a fundamental core of human language processing, one that is flexible enough to adapt to various forms of communication. The brain's language network is not static. It is constantly modulated by context, task demands, and even the temporal dynamics of conversation. During real-time dialogue, for example, neural systems for speech production and comprehension become tightly coupled, allowing speakers and listeners to synchronize not just their words but their underlying brain activity. This coupling is bidirectional. As a speaker formulates and utters a sentence, the listener's brain actively predicts and interprets the incoming speech, often completing phrases or anticipating meanings before the speaker is finished. Experiments using neuroimaging and electrophysiology have demonstrated that Broca's area and Wernicke's area, two of the most prominent language regions, exchange information in both directions during interactive communication. The direction and strength of this connectivity can shift depending on whether a person is actively speaking or listening, reflecting the dynamic nature of real-life conversation. Moreover, the time scale over which the brain processes language content differs depending on the demands of the interaction. During dialogue, neural representations of what is being said are shared between speaker and listener, but these representations are modulated by how quickly information flows. Some processes operate on the scale of milliseconds, parsing the acoustic details of speech, while others integrate information over seconds or even longer, constructing a coherent narrative or shared understanding. This temporal layering ensures that comprehension is both immediate and cumulative, balancing the need for rapid response with the construction of deeper meaning. Production and comprehension, speaking and understanding, are two sides of the same coin, but they rely on subtly different neural dynamics. When we produce language, the process begins with intention and meaning, semantics, which are then mapped onto word forms, phonology, and ultimately translated into motor commands for speech or writing. Comprehension runs the process in reverse. The brain starts with the perception of sounds or letters, identifies their phonological or orthographic forms, and then reconstructs meaning from these inputs. Studies using advanced imaging techniques have shown that these processes, while overlapping, recruit partially distinct networks and can be differentially affected by injury or disease. The organization of language in the brain is underpinned by a pair of major neural streams. The so-called dorsal stream is thought to support the mapping of sound to motor representations, crucial for repeating or producing speech, while the ventral stream is more involved in linking sound to meaning, underpinning comprehension. These streams are composed of multiple interconnected regions and pathways, allowing information to flow flexibly depending on the nature of the linguistic task. The evolution from classic models to this more nuanced view has been driven in large part by advances in neuroimaging, which have illuminated the diffuse and networked nature of language processing. Language is rarely a solitary activity. In conversation, the brain's language regions do not operate in isolation, but are linked in a real-time loop between speakers and listeners. Functional coupling between neural systems for speech production and comprehension enables the rapid exchange and updating of information, allowing conversation partners to remain in sync. This coupling has been observed not only in laboratory settings, but also in more naturalistic dialogues, suggesting it is a fundamental feature of human linguistic interaction. Visual information continues to play a vital role even in spoken language. The brain is highly sensitive to the sight of moving lips and facial expressions, using these cues to disambiguate sounds and enhance understanding. Experiments have shown that visual influences on speech perception can occur at very early stages of processing, sometimes even before the auditory signal is fully analyzed. These findings highlight the brain's ability to combine sensory information rapidly and effectively, maximizing the chances of accurate comprehension. At the heart of these processes is a network of connectivity that is both robust and adaptable. Wernicke's area, for instance, serves as a hub for integrating both auditory and visual language inputs, supporting not only the parsing of individual words, but also the analysis of sentence structure and meaning. The connections between Wernicke's area and other language regions, such as Broca's area, are bidirectional and dynamic, reflecting the give and take of natural communication. These connections are not fixed. They can be strengthened or rerouted in response to experience or injury, underscoring the remarkable plasticity of the language network. Recent research has even drawn intriguing parallels between the neural activity observed during human conversation and the internal states of large language models used in artificial intelligence. During both speech comprehension and production, patterns of brain activity align with the unfolding of linguistic meaning, suggesting that certain computational principles may be shared across biological and artificial systems. While much remains to be explored, these findings offer a tantalizing glimpse into the deep structure of language processing. The thalamus, long considered a relay station for sensory information, also appears to play a role in language. Specific thalamic nuclei are functionally modulated during language comprehension, suggesting that the flow of linguistic information through the brain is shaped not only by cortical regions but also by subcortical structures. This adds another layer of complexity to our understanding of how meaning is constructed in real time. Not all aspects of language processing have been fully mapped, and the field continues to evolve rapidly. Some questions remain about how exactly different types of language, such as figurative speech, irony, or poetry, are handled in the brain, or how language networks adapt to multilingual environments. However, what is clear is that extracting meaning from spoken and written language involves both selective and shared neural processes, drawing on a distributed yet tightly coordinated network. Throughout this intricate process, the brain's capacity for integration and adaptation is on full display. Whether parsing a whispered word in a crowded room, reading a novel, or engaging in animated debate, our brains move effortlessly from sound to meaning, guided by a web of connections that span sensory, cognitive, and social domains. The story of language processing is one of remarkable complexity, ingenuity, and flexibility, a testament to the brain's enduring capacity to create and share meaning. From the moment an infant first hears the muffled sounds of voices through the womb, the brain is preparing for a lifelong journey with language. This journey is not simply about learning words and rules, but is a remarkable unfolding of brain development, adaptation, and at times, challenge. To understand how language truly comes alive in the brain, we must trace this path from the earliest days of life through the unique adaptations of bilingual minds and into the territory where things occasionally go awry, revealing the brain's deep-seated mechanisms for language. In the earliest months of life, the infant brain is primed for language, an instinctive, hardwired drive shaped by both biology and experience. Newborns arrive equipped with sophisticated neural machinery ready to process the basic sounds of language known as phonemes. Research has shown that even in infancy, the brain registers subtle differences between speech sounds, and these neural signatures can be observed as distinct patterns of electrical activity. But while the capacity for language is innate, it does not develop in isolation. The environment plays a crucial role. The richness and variety of language an infant hears actively shapes the architecture of the developing brain. Neuroscience studies have revealed that the quality and quantity of early language experience are powerful predictors of brain development and future language skills. Infants exposed to more spoken words, varied vocabulary, and responsive social interaction show more robust growth in the brain regions that support language. This is not simply a matter of hearing words, but of engaging in meaningful back-and-forth exchanges. The brain's response to language is especially strong in social contexts. When an infant is spoken to directly, or when sounds are accompanied by eye contact and gestures, the neural circuits for language light up more intensely. These early experiences leave measurable traces in the brain's structure, especially in the networks that will later support grammar, vocabulary, and literacy. The process of language acquisition involves the creation and pruning of countless synaptic connections. In early childhood, the brain generates an abundance of neural pathways, many dedicated to processing the sounds and patterns of language. Over time, the connections used most frequently are strengthened, while those neglected are gradually pared away, a process that optimizes the brain's efficiency for the specific language environment in which the child is immersed. This phenomenon explains why childhood is a critical period for language learning. The young brain is especially plastic, eager to adapt to the sounds, rhythms, and rules it encounters. But exposure alone is not enough. Evidence shows that children must actually use language, hear it, process it, and attempt to produce it, for the full suite of brain mechanisms to mature. Social engagement acts as a catalyst, focusing attention and reinforcing the neural patterns most relevant for communication. The predictive power of early neural responses is striking. Brain measures taken in infancy, such as sensitivity to speech sounds, can forecast later language and literacy outcomes, underscoring how foundational these early years are for future development. For those who grew up in bilingual environments, the story takes on an extra dimension. The bilingual brain is a living testament to the brain's capacity for adaptation, or plasticity. Far from being confused by exposure to more than one language, the bilingual brain reorganizes itself to manage and control the flow of multiple linguistic systems. This adaptation is evident both functionally and structurally. Studies have found that bilingual individuals show increased gray and white matter in regions associated with language and executive function, as well as enhanced connectivity between these areas. The effects are not static. Rather, they change dynamically over time, mapping onto the evolving demands of language control and use. One of the most striking findings about bilingual brains is that switching from one language to another is not an effortful, conscious act for fluent speakers. Instead, it seems to occur naturally, with the brain showing no sign of disruption when alternating between languages. This fluidity is supported by brain mechanisms that, rather than detecting and flagging language boundaries, allow for seamless transitions. The bilingual experience does more than just enable communication in two tongues. It fine-tunes the brain's attentional systems, making them more efficient at filtering out distractions and inhibiting irrelevant information. In other words, the cognitive system becomes more adept, not just at managing language, but at juggling competing demands more generally. Bilingualism is associated with lifelong benefits. Structural differences in the brains of bilinguals, such as retention of more gray and white matter in language-related areas, have been observed in both children and adolescents. These differences are thought to reflect the brain's ongoing efforts to maintain and coordinate multiple languages. Over the lifespan, these adaptations may contribute to what is known as cognitive reserve, a kind of neural resilience that can help delay the onset of cognitive decline in later life. Indeed, some studies indicate that the effects of bilingualism on brain structure are dynamic and nonlinear, with periods of rapid adaptation corresponding to times of increased language use or learning. The impact of bilingualism extends beyond language itself. Bilinguals often show enhancements in executive control, the suite of cognitive processes involved in attention, inhibition, and task switching. This is thought to arise because managing two languages requires constant monitoring and selection, training the brain's control networks in a way that generalizes to other domains. The result is not a fundamentally different brain, but a brain sculpted by experience, one that is, in a sense, bilingual not just in language, but in its very patterns of thought and control. Yet, for all its adaptability, the brain's language system is not invulnerable. When language processing goes awry, the resulting disorders can be as revealing as they are challenging. They offer windows into the architecture and functioning of the underlying system, showing what happens when specific components are disrupted. Developmental language disorder, or DLD, is one such condition. Unlike language delays caused by hearing loss, intellectual disability, or environmental deprivation, DLD arises from differences in the brain's language networks themselves. Recent imaging studies have revealed subtle but significant structural differences in the brains of children with DLD. These differences are not confined to a single area, but often involve distributed networks that support the processing and production of language. Children with DLD may struggle to learn new words, formulate sentences, or follow complex instructions, even though their nonverbal intelligence is typically within the normal range. The challenge appears to stem from the brain's reduced efficiency in building and maintaining the connections necessary for rapid, fluent language use. Another disorder, childhood apraxia of speech, highlights the complexity of translating linguistic intent into coordinated motor output. In this condition, children know what they want to say, but struggle to plan and sequence the movements needed to produce speech sounds correctly. The breakdown occurs not at the level of understanding or word retrieval, but in the intricate choreography of muscles and timing required for articulation. This disorder underscores the importance of the brain's motor systems in supporting language, and how disruptions in these circuits can have far-reaching effects on communication. Aphasia, meanwhile, typically arises in adults after stroke, injury, or degenerative disease. Unlike developmental disorders, aphasia is an acquired condition that disrupts previously intact language abilities. Its symptoms and severity depend on the location and extent of brain damage. Some individuals may lose the ability to find words, speak fluently, or understand spoken and written language, while others may struggle with reading or writing. The patterns of deficit reflect the distributed nature of language in the brain. Damage to specific regions or connections can selectively impair particular aspects of language while sparing others. Treatment for aphasia often involves intensive language therapy, and there is growing interest in approaches that harness the brain's capacity for reorganization or neuroplasticity to support recovery. The study of language disorders is not limited to identifying deficits. It also informs our understanding of brain organization, development, and adaptation. For example, new neuroimaging findings have shown that the brains of individuals with developmental language disorder display differences in the structure of white matter pathways, bundles of nerve fibers that connect distant brain regions. These structural differences may underlie the difficulties in integrating and coordinating the various components of language processing. Clinical assessment of language disorders involves a careful evaluation of speech production, comprehension, vocabulary, grammar, and social use of language. This comprehensive approach recognizes that language is a multifaceted skill, supported by the interplay of many neural systems. Interventions for speech and language disorders vary depending on the nature of the problem. For some children, targeted therapy can help strengthen weak connections or compensate for areas of difficulty. In the case of acquired conditions like aphasia, therapy may focus on re-engaging undamaged brain areas or teaching new strategies for communication. Advances in neuroscience are beginning to inform these interventions, suggesting ways to tailor therapy to the unique neural profiles of individuals. Across the lifespan, language is both a product of and a force for brain development. From the exuberant plasticity of infancy to the adaptive feats of bilingualism, and through the challenges posed by disorder and injury, the brain's language systems are in constant motion, reshaping themselves in response to experience, need, and sometimes adversity. The story of language in action is thus a story of dynamic interplay between biology and environment, between innate potential and lived experience. It is a testament to the brain's remarkable capacity to transform sound and symbol into meaning, and to the resilience of the human drive to connect and communicate, even when the path is far from straightforward.